please introduce yourselves and let us know, how long you've been at the center and what you do.
Okay. I am Theresa Kosen. I'm the executive director at the California Wolf Center, and I've just been here 8 months. But I have a background in nonprofit management and museums throughout San Diego County. I've worked with them for the past 25 years.
Yeah, and I am Ciera Maclsaac, and I am the Wolf Care and Reintroduction Coordinator here at the Wolf Center. I've been here for a little over 2 years, with a lot of my background actually being wolves and other types of canids. So do a lot of work when it comes to taking care of the wolves on a day-to-day basis, making sure they're living happy and fulfilled lives. And then the reintroduction side, working with the Mexican wolf species survival plan to bring them back, hopefully, from the brink of extinction.
Why don't you tell us, first of all, how did the center even come to be?
So the center was started in 1977 by a biologist from University of San Diego, California. And he is Paul Kennis. He and his wife, Judy, bought some property out here in Julian, California. And they came out, enjoyed the landscape, and thought it'd be a really interesting place to maybe bring a couple of wolf puppies. And so they started the first nonprofit, which was the Julian Center for Science and Education. And as the wolves bred, they developed a bigger pack, and more people were interested in seeing the wolves out here. And those were northwestern wolves. So that's the species you would see in Yellowstone National Park today. Those were the first wolves brought to Julian, to our wolf center. In 1997 is when the Wolf Center was formed to become the California Wolf Center. So when we joined the Mexican wolf species survival plan is when we brought the Mexican gray wolf to our property. And since then, we've become the biggest holding facility and breeding facility of Mexican gray wolves in the world.
And how many of them do you have now?
We have 25 Mexican gray wolves right now. In the past, since we joined the SSP, we've had over 60 puppies born here. We've had at least 6 that we know of return to the wild. There's definitely way more, because pups could be born here, transferred to other facilities, and then released out into the wild. But that we know of through a technique called cross-fostering, 6 pups from our facility have been released out into the wild. Cross-fostering is when you take a captive-born wolf puppy and it is placed into a wild wolf den and raised by that wild wolf pack. And so it's a little bit more complicated than just, here you go, mom, here's a pup. Probably the biggest hurdle that we face during cross-fostering is the puppies have to be within 1 to 2 weeks old and within 1 to 2 weeks of the wild-born puppies. So it is a lot of constant monitoring by the facility that is breeding and potentially going to cross-foster, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Arizona Fish and Game, New Mexico Fish and Game, that are watching their wild wolf packs to see, okay, this mom has finally denned down, she's probably had puppies, and then they contact us or vice versa and see if we have met that time frame window. And if we do, the pups will be flown from captivity out to the wild. The release sites for Mexican gray wolf cross-fostering is Apache National Forest and Gila National Forest. So it's right on the border of Arizona and New Mexico. And with that, U.S. Fish and Wildlife and field volunteers, field conservationists will take over from there. And they will hike out as far as they need to go to that wild wolf den. And all the adult wolves leave, hoping we don't know where the den is, potentially trying to lead us away, or just hoping that their den is secret enough. We've obviously been watching it for months, so they definitely know where the den is. But with that, they will take all the wild-born puppies out of the den and do a lot of scent marking with the captive-born puppies. I know it sounds really gross to us as people, but they will stimulate the puppies to urinate on one another. But also during that time, they are taking DNA samples, blood samples. They're microchipping those puppies. So very similar to our dog's microchip, where you can scan it and have an ID tag, basically. And then when they place the puppies back into the den, they also take dirt and fur from the den and rub that all over the puppies. So when mom comes back, a big slogan in the cross-fostering program is "Mom can't count." So there they go. They're in the wild. And it is all for that genetic component. We are with Mexican gray wolves. They went down to really, really low numbers. There was actually less. There was 13 left in the 70s. That was it. So every single one of them was rounded up by U.S. Fish and Wildlife and by biologists at the time who were really interested in saving this subspecies of gray wolf. And now we're sitting at numbers that are a little bit less than 700, which is fantastic. And most of them are in captivity. There's about at least 196 in the wilds of the United States, and around 40 in the wilds of Mexico. But those are still obviously better numbers than 13. So it's really amazing that we can continue reintroduction, continue getting genetics that are definitely valuable out into the wild to keep those populations as healthy as possible.
How do you choose the pups?
Well, that's a really good question. So sometimes it's SSP decisions. So, okay, we want 2 males, 2 females, or we want, these genes specifically. So a lot of it has to do with their genetics. That's probably the biggest one is this genetically valuable? Is their genes more and or less represented? Is there less of an inbreeding coefficient? That is decided by the SSP geneticists, which are very intelligent people. But they also, for us, sometimes it's okay, we want this pair to breed because they're very genetically valuable. And when cross-fostering happens, sometimes it's okay, we want these ones, and other times it's whatever you guys want to give us. So the last time we cross-fostered, we released 3 females and 1 male from the same litter. And that was just a management decision made at the time. It's sometimes easier to house males than it is to house females. And so it's also really awesome for the wild because that's 3 more females that can hopefully reach maturity, go out and start their own packs and have more puppies.
And I'm sure people are going to want to know what's the success rate of when you do this, reintroduction from these pups, because people are going to want to know, okay, does the mom have enough milk for all of these additional?
Yeah, so when it comes to cross-fostering, there's obviously a lot of different things that go into play. One, we want to make sure mom is healthy enough, so they're definitely monitoring that pack. Sometimes they'll actually supplementally feed an area where they know that potentially there's cross-fostered puppies to help that pack a little bit more. They also make sure that the puppies that are going out into the wild are the strongest and healthiest. Specifically because they are so young. With wolves, they can only start being vaccinated at around 6 to 8 weeks old, very similar to our dogs. And so since they're only 1 to 2 weeks old, you can't vaccinate them. So that is a struggle when it comes to young puppies. The mortality rate in the wild is pretty high. But the success rate of mom actually accepting those puppies is almost 100%, because wolves are so family oriented. It is known that even out in the wild without human intervention, they will actually adopt potential lone puppies. They're very, very family oriented. And they also make sure when they cross foster that they're never giving more than what mom can handle. So they say between 8 and 10 puppies, that's how many mom can nurse. And so let's say we go to a den and it turns out that she had 10 puppies out in the wild and we have 2 puppies that we want to cross foster. What they'll do is actually called a true cross foster, where they'll take puppies and leave puppies. And so the puppies that are taken will be taken back to that center and raised by the captive wolf mom. So that also continues to help with that genetic mixing and or removing genetics from the wild that maybe shouldn't be there.
Wolves have been maligned for so long, and there's so much misconception around wolves. Tell us what people should understand about wolves.
What I've learned here is that wolves are very much afraid of people. So We have a bumper sticker that we sell that's called Red Riding Hood.
Little Red Riding Hood lied.
Little Red Riding Hood lied. Yes, that there is the image of the big bad wolf does not exist, and unfortunately, Hollywood has misaligned the image of the wolf terribly so. And wolves are very much afraid of new things. They're afraid of people. They don't want to have anything to do with us. They just want to be in the wild and do what wild wolves do. Now, if it's on a tour, and we have 2 ambassador packs that visitors can come and tour our facility and get to see those ambassador packs, those wolves will come up to the fence line. And people often say, well, can I feed them? Can I touch them? Like, no, the reason they're here and they're coming up the fence line is they know that there's a fence between you and them.
Yeah, and it's definitely an unfortunate thing with a lot of predators is that they have been malaligned with, oh, they're a hunter, and so we should be afraid of them. And wolves probably are the biggest one that most people fear. Even I have tour guests that won't want to go into a viewing area because they don't know, okay, is the wolf going to be? And it's like, nope, the wolf is in its own habitat. You don't have to worry about that. But it's a very innate fear, and it's been continuously passed on generation to generation through media, but also just through people's general perceptions. And there is very little to no evidence of wolf attacks on people. And with all wildlife, if it comes up to you, there is a high likelihood that it is sick and or has been fed by people. It has gotten used to being around people. It's habituated. And that's when animals can be dangerous. And that's from the smallest squirrel to a bison. Any kind of wildlife can be dangerous. But it is about giving it a healthy respect and giving them space. And that's what wolves actually do with people. They hear you, smell you, see you way before you see them. They want nothing to do with us. They are incredibly family-oriented animals. They can teach us a lot about teamwork and working together and family communication, but they really are just an important part of the ecosystem.
Tell me about the center's role when it comes to education around wolves.
So that is one of the keystones of our mission, which is to educate. And so we invite people to come here in person. We do some virtual programs as well. And it's really back to kind of working people through education is helping them understand the important role the wolves play in our ecosystem, and as well to help them overcome their fear or to overcome the myths around wolves. So that's why we have 2 ambassador packs that are on our property that are, one is an ambassador pack of the Northwestern gray wolf, which again is the one you would see in Yellowstone, and they're large and beautiful. And the other is the Mexican gray wolf, a subspecies, and they're a little smaller and equally as beautiful in a more rangy kind of petite way.
They're super fluffy.
And right now they're all fluffy because we are in our winter season. So they have their fluffy, beautiful coats on. And so it's a part of educating the public on the role the wolf plays today in our country, and that there are no wolves, wild wolves in Southern California. The only place you're going to see wolves is at our California Wolf Center. So a lot of people in our region and in our area, even in our state, do not know that there are wolves on display to visit at our California Center. So that's why we're here, and to be a part of a reintroduction, to be a part of educating about conservation of the wolf and the role it plays in the wild, contributes to the overall ecosystem of our natural resources. So that's what we're here to do about education.
Obviously, one of the biggest issues that we always hear about is the big bad wolf going after the sheep or going after a farmer's, cows and things like that. And from what I understand, that's not necessarily reality.
Of course, yes. So with ranching and farming communities, there is a fear, and we're not going to deny that it doesn't exist. The wolf is an apex predator, but it's also an opportunistic hunter. And so with that, unfortunately, it can lead to them getting a little too close for comfort, or taking things that they're not supposed to. And so what we do a lot is any kind of technique that is going to be non-lethal, of course, and helping educate the ranching communities about wolf behavior. Probably the biggest one, as Theresa said earlier, is that they are neophobic. They're afraid of new things. So there's a lot of different techniques with flagery, with sound boxes, all things that make weird sounds. They look different, something that scares away wolves from an area. And these are all more so those coexistent techniques where it's like, hey, you can live in this area, but make sure you're not staying in this specific spot. And so a big part of us as well is we are very supportive of ranching communities. We don't want them to feel alone. And unfortunately, that does happen a lot where they feel like, hey, I'm not getting the support. You guys want wolves in this area, but you need to support the people who live there. And we absolutely listen, making them feel like they have not only emotional support as person to person, but also financial support if anything does happen.
Theresa, can you tell us about some of the projects that you do at the California Wolf Center?
One of the areas that our California Wolf Center has very much supported the ranching community is, again, the idea of financial support to ranchers. And there are methods that we have supported. One of them is the creation of something called the Working Circle. And it's now its own nonprofit organization, but it got its beginning through the California Wolf Center. And it's an organization that was started to help ranchers in Northern California by providing funding for range riders. Those are cowboy-esque type people that go out and ride the range of the ranchers and the ranching community to keep track of the wolves, to keep track of the dens, the packs, and to set up the flagery, the noise boxes, the things that can help detract from the wolf interaction with the livestock. So it's a collaboration that was started by the Wolf Center and now has spun off to its own nonprofit. So that's one way that we supported the ranching community. We continue to provide support in the state of New Mexico and Arizona through, again, not paying, the federal government pays for depredation. So if a farmer or a rancher can show proof that a wolf did take their livestock, they pay a fee for depredation. But we provide funding for the deterrence, because that's what's important to us. We don't want a wolf to be removed from the wild because it's been too attracted to livestock, because that's what would happen, or to be destroyed because of that. So we want to provide funding that helps with avoidance. And so to that end, something new that they've started in those states is what they call pay for presence. So they actually provide funding to ranchers when they've identified that a pack is on their property or a wolf mother is denning. They'll pay for presence to allow the rancher to receive funding to allow those wolves to be there. And so we are very involved in that area as just the California Wolf Center, and in holding funding through a Mexican wolf recovery fund that we have raised funds for, and we set that aside just for that purpose.
How can people support you? It's got to be extremely expensive to feed packs of wolves. But as you mentioned, you're not just feeding them. You've got to provide enrichments. You've got to provide staffing. You've got to provide the project costs. Share a little bit about that, because I want people to understand that when they're donating to your center, where's the money going?
Of course. So specifically for my end with food, we have 29 wolves total. So we have 25 Mexican gray wolves and 4 Northwestern gray wolves, which each of these guys, we feed a feast or famine lifestyle, meaning we don't feed them every day, just like they would eat out in the wild. And each feeding, they're getting roughly about 20 pounds of food per wolf per sitting. So when you round that off on one day, and then times that by a whole year, we're roughly feeding a little over $5,000 worth of food every month. And that's just for straight food, straight care. When it comes to staffing wise, we are a very small nonprofit staff, but we also have so much support from volunteers that will come out to help scoop wolf poop and clean out water tubs and feed the wolves. We also, with enrichment, we try our best to bring new things, new interesting things, especially right now during the Christmas season. A lot of the wolves are going to be getting Christmas trees, which is super exciting. That's a interesting scent, but also something new and different. We can also have to provide veterinary care for our wolves, and every single year our wolves do get vaccinated. But on top of that, if there's any injury that might happen, any emergency that might happen, being able to financially provide for that is definitely a need. Whenever we transfer wolves or we take wolves in, those are all things that are helped and supported by donors and people who are just interested in helping with the wolves themselves. There's obviously other things Theresa could talk about, but that's definitely specifically with the wolves. There's so much that goes into their feeding, their cleaning, and their happiness to make sure that these guys are living the best life possible until hopefully they can go out into the wild.
Going to follow up with a couple other ideas of kind of where we're headed with the Wolf Center. Yeah. So as I mentioned, our start is we're now celebrating 45 years as a Wolf Center in California. And so we've put a lot of funding actually into external ways that we've supported the wolf community through the cross fostering, through Working Circle, through funding of the Mexican gray wolf efforts in other states, somewhat to the point where we need to start putting funding into our own facility. So we have a master plan that we're just finished that we now want to launch. We have aging facilities here. Our wolf care, our wolf food storage building is falling down. we would love to have a medical facility. We don't have a medical facility, just a small medical facility on site. All the work here is done medically by volunteers. We have volunteer vet who's on our board, and we just like to grow some of our facilities, replace aging ones, and make it more accommodating to visitors. What is here where we are is definitely a ranching community. Our facility is like a ranch house. So when visitors come, they're going to experience a very unique setting. Our road here is gravel, and it's a big, we're at 4,600 feet. Yep. So you climb a mountain to get to us, and it's a great adventure, but there are some things that we need to improve upon. So to that end, we have a master plan that we've launched, and we're excited for the next 40 years for the Wolf Center to grow and hopefully build more enclosures. There's a need for that from our own wolves that we have here. As they're aging, we need to expand our enclosure, expand the number of enclosures we have. And so we're looking to do that as well.
If people want to donate, can they donate to a specific thing, or does it go into a general fund?
You can do, people who want to donate can donate to everything from sponsor a wolf, like provide feeding for a wolf, naming a wolf. We have, you can name a wolf.
It's a really awesome program.
It is. And you can donate to the master plan. You can donate to the Mexican Wolf Fund. Those are all different areas on our website that you can visit and click through and decide how you'd like to support us. You can come out here from any place in the country if you so desire and see our wolves. So there are many opportunities, and we'll be happy to share those.
That's fantastic. I think it was it was only a couple of years ago that the wolves were taken off the endangered species list. And that was during the last administration. And now I believe that the Biden administration has put them back on again, except in certain states. Tell us about how you felt.
When it comes to a big part of the California Wolf Center is we are all about education. As Theresa was saying, that is probably our greatest strength right now is educating the public as much as possible. And we want people to have the facts, make their opinions of themselves.
So what do you think is the future of wolves in America?
I do see, truthfully, I do see a shift. There is a shift of how generations are looking at the world that we live in, how we see ourselves playing a role in our ecosystems and our environments. Definitely people becoming more conscious of things like climate change, of things like extinction, and what can we do to not necessarily reverse something, because you can't change what happened in the past, but what can we do to support ecosystems, communities that we think need help. And so when it comes to wolves, I do think that there is a shift. There's a lot of states that, maybe 50 years ago would be completely different in mindset than what they are today. And I think California was a great shift when it came to conservation efforts and our ecosystem. Whereas might not have been before. And so I do see a lot of people coming into the mindset of, hey, there is ways to live with wildlife that might have different behavior than what we would prefer. And wildlife that we might be afraid of, wildlife that we might not truly understand. And I think there's a lot of hope, especially when it comes to things like the Mexican gray wolf, where they were almost extinct. And now we're sitting at pretty high numbers comparatively, especially in the short amount of time that they have been a focus of conservation. And so I really do see a good shift, a shift of coexistence between ranching communities, conservationists, and wolves all working together instead of working against one another.
So do you go in schools? Do you do, you mentioned that you do some virtual, but do you do talks in schools?
Pre-COVID,
yes.
we did, yes. Pandemic, that stopped because schools were virtual, right? Classrooms were virtual. We did some reevaluating how we can get into the schools again, either having them come on site with field trips or virtually, if that's what the teachers prefer again, or do we go into schools and do programs? So once kids have seen a wolf, preferably in person because it's so impressive, and learned about them, that's what starts a whole conversation, right? It's through your children.
I would say definitely over 2022, we had a lot more school programs than we had the year previous. A lot more actual homeschool groups, which have been amazing. Getting school groups that are, hey, we're learning about ecology today. Can you talk more so about that when it comes to wolf? And so also having a little bit more specialized programming for whatever that teacher's need is. Because some people are really interested in animal behavior. So going into how wolves communicate, how wolves form packs, all those kinds of things. Or are they more so interested in things like Yellowstone and how that Yellowstone reintroduction showed us that they're a keystone species?
If people want to do a virtual, who would they contact? How would they get a hold of you? How would they set that up?
So through our website, we have an education and marketing coordinator on staff who sets up the field trips on site as well as virtual visits with classrooms.
What do you want to leave people? If people who are listening to this, what do you want to leave them with as a thought around either what you're doing or about wolves, about conservation? Just give me your last thoughts on all of that.
I'd like to leave people with the idea that when they've seen wolves or what they've learned about wolves is that it's very important to me that they see wolves as within the pack as a family. And wolves are very family focused. And there's the mom and the dad, and there's the kids, and there's aunts and uncles. And that's what the pack is. And that's how they live, how they operate, how they get along, how they communicate, how they hunt, how they take care of the young. It's very family focused. And I was under the assumption there was the alpha that led the pack, and it was a male, and he bred with whoever he wanted, and that was what life as a wolf was like. And that is not at all the way wolves live in the wild or even at our facility. And you see that and you start to learn, and we should be, as families, more like wolves.
Yeah, I would definitely say just leaving people with the idea that whatever your passion may be, in conservation, with animals, with anything in your life, is something that you can definitely make a difference. And I think that was a big thing with conservation maybe a handful of years ago, where there was a lot of bleak. It was a lot of this versus this, and we're the reason for this problem. And not necessarily saying those things don't exist, but seeing it in a different light, and seeing it in a light of conservation has potential. Wolves have the amazing opportunities to go back out into the wild and be successful, working with people, working in communities, and just that they are an animal that we can learn a lot about ourselves from. They're an animal that is so environmentally important to their ecosystems, and that there is hope for coexistence, and there's hope for bringing a species back from the brink of extinction.
Yeah. A lot of people don't understand what apex predator actually means. Can you define that?
Yeah, so probably the two most important terms when it comes to wolves that are thrown around a lot. One is apex predator and one is keystone species. So with apex predator, it means that they are the top of the food chain. There is nothing hunting them for food. They are what wolves usually are hunting: elk, moose, bison, deer. With Mexican wolves, they'll actually go after javelina as well, which is kind of the little wild pig boar. And so basically meaning nothing is hunting them for food. So that is a misconception that happens a lot with wolf and coyote and wolf and mountain lion conflict, or wolf and bear, is, oh, they killed it for food. And that's not usually the case. It's more of a territoriality thing. It's stay out of my territory. And so a mountain lion is an apex predator as well. And they live in the same area as a wolf. And so they're both tops of their food chain. There's nothing hunting them. And with keystone species, this gets thrown with a lot of different species, which basically means that when they are removed from their area, you're going to see a very big shift. And so the analogy is, if you've ever seen a stone archway, there's a middle stone that's shaped a little differently than everybody else. And when you remove that stone, the whole archway falls apart. And that's what the wolf is for their ecosystem. Other species that are keystone species as well, here in California and San Diego specifically, the sea otters, they're very important, the kelp forests. But with wolves, they have what is known as top-down control. They are controlling the prey populations. So they're making sure that those elk populations don't explode, which would in turn affect the soil contents, the grass, the roots, the trees, little smaller species, the other predators in the area. They have a control without knowing it. They aren't going out and saying, I have to kill this elk and eat it so that the populations are healthy. They don't think that way. They are just doing what is naturally instinctive for them, which is, I need to hunt, I need to feed my family. And in turn, it is actually keeping that ecosystem very balanced and very healthy.
Which is what we found when the reintroduction happened, or when in 1906, we basically decimated the population of wolves in the continental US. And then, thank God, there were enough people, biologists and people in conservation that brought
something.
Yeah. Let's rescue a few, please.
Let's because what I love about the Yellowstone reintroduction, it was kind of a whim. It was like let's see if this works.
Yeah.
And it really. And the Yellowstone that people see in documentaries today, the Yellowstone that people see in movies or go out today in person, was not the same Yellowstone that it was in the late 90s until wolf reintroduction. And the rivers are beautiful, and the songbirds and the bison populations and the elk populations, the evergreens, everything is just so lush, and it's because the wolves controlled the populations of prey that were destroying those things without, it wasn't on purpose. Elk are wonderful for their environment, but when they don't have someone controlling their populations.
Any final words?
Well, thank you so much for even thinking of us.
Yeah.
We are one of the largest holders of Mexican gray wolves in the world. We're one of the largest breeding facilities of Mexican gray wolves. And a biased opinion, Mexican gray wolves are one of the cutest animals in the world. So it's really cool to also be a part of something that this is conservation that you can see in your state. It is something that you don't have to go to a completely different country. You can go to your state right next door to you, or even the state that you are in, and see a creature that you can help and can support. And it's something that's so important here.
Thank you so much for your time. So exciting.